Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Elizabeth Farmer, and I'll be the moderator today. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you joined the audio via phone, please be sure to enter your PIN number to enable audio control. If you did not enter the PIN, you may find it now by going to the audio section of the control box on the right of your screen. You may enter questions in the chat box at any time, and all questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Today's event is Why is Everyone Talking About Virtual Cards? Our presenter is Mike Duffy. Mike's been around the IT and business processes side of the travel industry since, well, the turn of the century. His focus has been on leveraging out-of-the-box software and in-house development to bring departments together for greater internal efficiencies. After 15 years with a large travel management company, Mike joined Grasp Technologies, where he works with TMCs and their clients in adopting the payment strategies of the future. So welcome, Mike, and
Great,
I am going to make you the presenter. There we go, and allow you to share your screen and begin.
Great, it's just taking a moment to switch screens. So actually, I think Gary might be set as the presenter right now.
Oh, let me see. Oh, you are so right. Let me make that quick correction. There we go.
Perfect, thank you. Great, thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, everyone, for joining. My pleasure to be here to go over this sort of a new, well, new-ish, I guess, virtual payments. There seems to be a lot of buzz around what virtual payments are and how they can work in the industry. And so what I'll be going through, and start off with some definitions, perhaps. What is a virtual card or a virtual payment? And truthfully, it's not a brand new technology, although more corporations are seeing the benefits, from virtual payments and how they can improve their business. And the industry has several different terms for these payments. Sometimes it's virtual payment, sometimes it's virtual credit card or virtual card, virtual account number, etc. But at a high level, these are very, very similar. And essentially, it's the creation of a credit card number dynamically, either from a line of credit or perhaps it's prepaid funds, and that number can be applied to a booking. And these card numbers never really exist on plastic, so you're never going to be able to carry this around in your wallet or purse. These are just they're numbers, they're real numbers, but they never really exist on plastic. Not only that, you can put controls around these cards and these card numbers as they're created. And so, there's benefits around locking it down, and you can lock it down to either a merchant type, perhaps it's travel related, so only a hotel or airline. You can do it for an amount, say if it's only going to be X number of dollars, and you can also do it for a specific lifetime, so it's only going to work within these dates. And that card can also be unique. And so as a result of this, and I'm going to dive into a little bit further, these controls, they greatly change both the security of the card and it makes the transaction more easily identifiable throughout the entire workflow. And so some of the benefits around virtual cards and why most businesses are interested in this is there's sort of two great features. One is fraud prevention, and the other one is reconciliation ease. And so most companies understand the importance of both. But however, if you have gone through the headaches of fraud, you'll have a greater weighting on that. Still, if you've never had a fraud issue, the risks without a virtual payment system are greater. So there's definitely some more advantages. With a virtual card, the risk is greatly reduced, in part because the cards can be single use. And so typically a solution would marry the cost of a reservation to the virtual card. And so, for example, if a hotel reservation is $300, then the value of that card can become only $300. Or perhaps you want to have a little cushion there or padding if you have incidentals, that sort of thing. So you can add that in as well. You can place certain rules around that, and that can be automatically applied. And so that can be either as a default value or it can be applied as the reservation is being generated. And so this is also a benefit for corporate policy as well. So it's much easier to adhere to corporate policy when the payment itself is locked down. So if the form of payment has stricter controls, then the travelers aren't easily able to bypass those controls without authorization. And as a result of the card numbers, being unique in most virtual payment programs, reconciliation becomes much, much easier. There's no mystery of who the transaction is associated to. And in most solutions, you can capture auxiliary information either manually inputted at the time the card is created, or when the reservation is associated to the card. So when the charges actually hit the card, once the traveler has either traveled on their airline or been to their hotel, then it's very easy to determine who the traveler is, and even down to cost centers, perhaps job numbers, GL codes, that sort of thing. It can be quickly ascertained due to the fact that the cards are unique and they're tied to the underlying reservation. And in a lot of these solutions, reports can be generated not only to display the transactions either in a detail or in a summary level, but to auto-reconcile those charges to the reservation with that supplemental data. So the data aspect of this is greatly increased. And so some background data, and just in terms of statistics around fraud and virtual payments and reconciliations and that sort of thing. The stats are changing frequently. So this is actually a couple of years old. 60% of organizations were exposed to some payment fraud back in 2013. I would expect that that's continuing to grow. And so we have to put in better controls around credit cards and payments and that sort of thing. And that's where virtual payments do come in. And the fraud can happen anywhere. It can even happen from perhaps the merchant itself at the hotel level. Sometimes it could happen at that level with perhaps their own staff, their own employees. But with better controls around the payment, you're able to prevent that fraud from happening. And again, with the virtual payments, because those card numbers are unique, the reconciliation can be automatic to the level of 99.9% matching. So incredibly easy to reconcile, and you don't need to have a number of staff going through hours and hours of trying to determine what that value is, that cost center, what have you. In terms of hotel acceptance, and that's a question that usually comes up, if these card numbers are dynamically generated, how likely is a merchant going to accept them? And will they accept them as they would a physical card? And the answer is yes, because the card number itself, there's no difference between a physical card number or a card number. So if I was, to quote you a card number, there's no identifier on the number itself to say whether this is virtual or I'm taking my physical credit card out of my pocket and reading that card number. There's no identifier to say one is plastic or one is virtual. So there's nothing to distinguish that, and therefore, there's sometimes reported situations where the merchant may want the name of the card to match the traveler's name, but that essentially would be no different than, say, a business travel account or what's called a ghost card. Some merchants will attempt to do this as sort of a means to thwart fraud, on those plastic cards. But the reality is, with virtual payments, there's so many more controls we have around those cards that make fraud so difficult that sort of validation by those merchants really add no value. And in fact, over time, merchants are seeing, if there's virtual cards are going to be a better process, both in terms of check-in and it is able to, forgo fraud. It makes it much easier. Other questions that arise from virtual payments is a refund, if it's applicable, how will I get those refunds after the card has expired? Now that really depends on the financial institution that's sort of providing the virtual cards in the background. But for the most part, you'll be able to place funds back to, whether it's a prepaid or a line of credit, automatically, even if the card has been expired. And some of these solutions will automate some additional features such as fax generation to a hotel perhaps. It's generated as a supplement to the booking process in a lot of these systems, and this will show the front and back of the virtual card even though the card itself has never really existed. It typically will generate an image of a card, so that provides a higher comfort level to the merchant. And some of these systems will send this right away during the booking process. Others will send it closer to the check-in date. And some will also send this to the traveler. So the traveler themselves may have some of this information, whether it's in an email or perhaps it might be through an app that's through their vendor. A lot of these solutions do have reporting on those transactions, and this can be both pre and post-trip data. And so pre-trip is more or less when the booking is being made. So being able to have all that information on the reservation, the payment, how that is captured and is captured at that point in time. You don't have to wait for the actual charges to come through. However, it is post-trip data when the charges are actually come through when the traveler has made their stay or perhaps they've completed their airfare. Those are also possible, and because those, again, as those card numbers are unique, it's very easy to sort of marry those up. So perhaps in the case of a hotel at the booking level, you may have a hotel at $300, but perhaps they allowed for meals, and so you'd see the real charge come in as well, and that would all marry up very easily because those cards numbers are unique, and this is fully automated. And again, here's this sort of an idea of a sort of reconciliation report and how that would look. And I do apologize that I'm kind of limited on space because there's so many fields that can be captured, unlike a credit card statement, which more or less would just show the hotel name and perhaps a charge. In most of these solutions, you can capture data as it's going through the entire workflow. So you can capture the traveler name, the booked amount, any taxes, the vendor, and even perhaps a cost center or GL code, job number, whatever seems to be relevant to your business. That information can be captured through the entire workflow. And there can be an unmatched category as well, and it still can happen where perhaps it's been recorded, a booking has been done, or perhaps it has not been completed for whatever reason that it hasn't been reported back to the travel agency that the booking was canceled. Perhaps the traveler canceled it with the hotel directly. So there are that fraction where it can happen, but for the most part, it is a 99.9% accuracy rate because those card numbers are completely unique. So some other notable possible features to have is communication to the traveler. So the traveler, they can also through these systems get that information either through an email or perhaps to download an app. But the idea is to empower them with the information and to have that at their fingertips. There's additional quality control for compliance. So you can make a reservation, say for a hotel, and sometimes the traveler perhaps will try to extend that, and if they have a card on file, that can easily be done, and so the corporation would not necessarily get all that information right away. Sometimes they'll see an inflated charge and have to dig a little bit deeper with that. However, with a virtual payment system, you are able to tie down that card number and identify that, so it makes it more challenging for the traveler to circumvent policy and compliance and have it always go through your TMC, and that way it can easily, that information can be applied and it can be approved if necessary. Some of these systems have multiple financial providers. There is a need for a financial provider in the background somehow. It has to be either some sort of bank or card issuer that will be able to provide Visa, Amex, MasterCard, and those numbers are generated and attached into the reservation systems. And so there are special integrations with the TMC reservation system to make that easier for them as well, to make sure that those cards are available and they can be easily applied within their current workflow. Some of these systems will work for offline or online bookings, so if you have an online booking tool, they can work with those. And it can also work perhaps for items over the phone, so if you had to call in to book a hotel or what have you, it is possible to have those cards work in those scenarios as well. And those cards can work for a variety of travel types. The biggest advantage is in hotel because there's more pain points around fraud and reconciliation in that particular travel type. And you can narrow down the card availability to particular merchant types. So it could be hotel, car, air, or it could be perhaps another merchant type that they may want to use it for, depending on your business needs. The fax notification, some systems will be able to notify you if there's any sort of errors on the fax that is sent to a hotel. And it will never be able to tell you whether the hotel has actioned the fax, but it will be able to tell you if they've technically received it, and that can be quite important itself. So perhaps a wrong fax number or the fax is busy, it's still important to get that information. Another thing to be aware of in some of these virtual systems, and it's neither a good or bad, but there is some will use a card at the beginning of the process that they aren't able to insert a virtual card, and then they'll later swap it out. And so sometimes those can be additional complexities. Generally, it is easier to start the entire workflow with the same card number. And that's one item to just be aware of, that some systems will have a different way of applying that information. And as I mentioned at the beginning, some systems will have prepaid, some will use credit. So depending on how your cash flow is or what you're looking for, those options are both available. And some I know overseas will have virtual debit options as well. Rebates are still possible with these programs. So you may be having a credit card provider now that's providing rebates. Those rebates are typically still remaining in a virtual payment system because they are still virtual cards, credit cards. So rebates are still quite possible, and those would be typically a Visa, MasterCard, Amex as the providers. I did mention a bit refunds. PCI compliance, so I just want to touch on this a little bit. It might be a little on the technical side, but it does come up in a lot of questionnaires. And so PCI, that is a credit card standard to sort of secure the cards themselves. A lot of organizations are struggling with this as it is quite complex, and it requires both IT and some business knowledge, and it can be quite costly in order to become compliant and to make sure that all your partners are also compliant. And so this security around hosting credit card numbers or the transmission of credit card numbers can add additional complexity. With virtual payment systems, that is mostly negated. Now, depending on how that is provided, if the card numbers are purely single use, if they are not reused, then they are outside of this PCI scope. And the reason being is that if a card is one single use and it's for a defined period of time, the risk of any sort of compromise is greatly reduced because if someone gets that card number, they can't really do anything with it. They cannot go to Home Depot and use it, or Costco, what have you. Unlike, say, the card number you pull out of your wallet or purse, that is available to be used everywhere. It's with a virtual payment system, you can dynamically change all those rules, and the card numbers themselves are unique, so that will negate the PCI compliance part. So they're outside of PCI scope. They don't need to fall under any sort of PCI rules. The information, as I mentioned, can be captured is sort of cost-centered, GL codes, job numbers, and that can be captured during the entire process. So there's no mystery for your accounting folks to sort of dig up who is this traveler, what organization or department are they sort of with, and how do we charge this back? So that work there, and that can be quite onerous on whatever department is doing it, but that sort of mystery is gone. As I mentioned, the 99.9% reconciliation, so it becomes very easy to assign that information back to whoever you need to charge that to. And multiple currencies are possible. Some, depending on the vendor, you can have multiple currencies. These cards are, typical credit card number. So if it's a foreign transaction, it will be accepted and automatically converted. However, if you have a group of people, perhaps they're traveling in Europe for a significant amount of time, and you want to leverage, reduce your currency exposure, you could have a line of credit or a prepaid, perhaps in euros rather than the US dollars, just to reduce your currency exposure. So that's possible as well, and that's very easily done. Most the prominent currencies are available in these systems, and so it makes it very easy. And that's essentially everything on virtual payment systems. Now I will give it back to you, Elizabeth, if you want to ask for any questions.
Thank you, Mike. We do have a number of questions that come in. You actually did a great job of answering some of them as we went along, but I do still have a few for you.
Sure.
The first one is there a minimum spend or number of use limit to make this a viable benefit to our company?
Well, to the company level, there's, you may see benefits right away. If you're reducing fraud, that may not translate into, a dollar or cost saving right away. It's sort of risk avoidance. In terms of reconciliation, you should see, savings on that front. If you have a number of folks trying to determine transactions going through, the card numbers are unique, and so that does make it incredibly easy on that front.
And can this be done with my current card provider, or do only some card providers give this option?
Some card providers will provide this, so it really depends on the financial institution you're with. And so there's a number of organizations out there that do make this available, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, even if your current financial institution does not provide a virtual payment system, it does not necessarily mean that you have to switch. It just means that for the virtual payment system, you would have to adopt one that does. But for most part, most of the larger financial institutions are involved in this technology.
Okay. You alluded to the fact that while most of these cards are single use, it sounds like they don't always have to be. Can you tell us why a card might not be single use?
Yes, so it's really, that's one for the financial institution. When you're selecting a virtual payment system, you will have to, it's a question to ask for them. It's up to them to decide, or if their technology is going to reuse cards. Some will do that just to make it easier for them versus making it easier for you. And so there are some that do offer completely unique, never reused cards, and then there are some that do reuse, and perhaps it's reused a year later. It's one of those questions to ask your financial institution when you're adopting one of these systems.
Okay, great, thank you. For the reporting, is it possible to get folio breakdown, for example, room, tax, meal, Wi-Fi, etc.?
That's a wonderful question, and that does come up. I have not seen one that provides them electronically with an itemized, line itemized data. I've seen some systems will request the hotel to send the folio data after the traveler has completed their stay. However, it's not an automated system, and it still requires the hotel to take that action to email the folio. And I'm really curious to see how the industry will evolve on this. I think there will be some changes to that probably in the next couple of years, but at this point in time, I have not seen any system that provides line item data on the hotel folio electronically.
For refunds, you said it is mostly possible to place a refund amount back onto a card even if it is expired. How then is that money used by the corporation? Is the card reactivated, or is the balance transferred to a new card number?
essentially it would be the latter. What would happen, because these card numbers are tied to an account of some sort, whether it's a prepaid account or perhaps it's a line of credit, what will happen is the card, even though it has been expired, it's simply going back to that. I'll use line of credit for an example. You're just receiving funds back to the line of credit, so when a new card number is used, it could be used against that amount within the line of credit.
This next one, I'm actually going to give it two separate questions, but I'm going to give it to you as one question with two parts. The first part is, what happens if the card value is less than the final charge? And the second part of that is going to be, if the traveler extends his stay at the hotel such that the charge exceeds the amount of the original virtual card, can that original card have more value added to it, or is a new virtual card needed to pay for the extra night?
Okay. Yeah, so there's a couple of questions there. So if a card value is less, then essentially it won't be the hotel, going back to a hotel as an example, because that tends to be the biggest pain point, they won't be able to charge the card because it just won't have enough funds. It's part of the controls in there. Now, with the controls, you can add for a sort of a variance, a cushion, a padding, if you will. So, you know, it's quite common. So if the reservation is, say, $300, you may have a 20% cushion, or 30% or what have you, 40%. And that really changes depending on the nature of your business. So if you have travelers that may happen quite frequently, or perhaps you want to turn down the padding, you want to make more control in there, that availability is there for you. Now, in part two of that question, you know, what happens if, you know, there is an extension and, you know, there's not enough funds on the card, or how do you change that? How can you make the card you know, last or live longer or have a different amount? That can be done either whoever's holding the line of credit will have availability to change that in a web portal. They can change that card number to both an amount and an expiry, and also at the merchant level if they needed to. But the TMC can also do that as well. So advising the TMC that, you know, the hotel stay is going to be a little bit longer, and then that, you know, that ties in the whole workflow. So that makes it easier not only for virtual payment reporting, but any sort of other reporting you may have with your TMC. So it would be quite important, you know, to keep the TMC informed, and that way, you know, everyone has all the information available to them. But either the person with the the corporation, with the line of credit or account, if they can change that through a web portal, or a TMC can do it as well, essentially.
Okay, and that actually leads nicely into the next question, which is, who generates or obtains these card numbers? How much front-end work is there to this system?
Sorry, so how much is it to set up?
How much front-end work is involved in setting up, and who generates or obtains the virtual card numbers?
So the work involved depends on the system. Sometimes there's some technical requirements, perhaps installs by your IT departments. Others will have a different approach where it may be just directly into a reservation system. Usually it's a little bit of a time, but it's not overly onerous on the corporation to set this up. Generally, it's only a couple of forms, to be quite frank. Why it would take a few weeks is your financial institution, or perhaps it's a new financial institution, would have to do some back-end work, and you know, with any sort of financial institution, there can be a lot of internal controls and red tape. So in terms of overall work and to get that set up, it's generally just a few forms. There may be some training around going through a web portal, but it's actually quite light in order to adopt a virtual payment system.
Okay. And the first part of that question, who generates or obtains the card numbers? I think that probably refers to, does the client need to be involved with doing that? Can the TMC do it for them?
It could be either or. So the TMC, depending on who has the relationship with the financial institution, it's essentially the financial institution will be the ones creating or providing the virtual credit card numbers, and then there'll be a technology provider that will provide that into a reservation system or to the TMC. So it could be either the TMC or the corporation. It really depends on who wants to have the account with the financial institution.
Okay. And you showed us the example of how the reporting can capture our specific fields, department code, cost center, etc. Is this read from the reservation, or does it require a separate entry somewhere?
That really depends on the virtual payment system, but for the most part, it will come from the reservation system. That information can be collected as the booking is made, ideally, and then that information will continue through the entire workflow right until the card is charged, and then it all comes back wonderfully because typically, as I mentioned, those card numbers are unique, and so they're very easy to marry up.
Okay. And how does the travel agent get the number to add it to the reservation?
So it really can vary depending on the system. Sometimes it's a web portal where they have to sign in and get the card number. Sometimes it's a Windows application that sits on their desktop beside the reservation system, and it may interact back and forth, and it will generate a card number. Sometimes it will show within the reservation system, just simply having a pool of cards available, and for the agents to leverage. So it really depends on the underlying system and how that technology provider has developed, their workflow.
Okay. And last question: for a charge in a foreign currency, if the card parameters were set in USD, is there a conversion fee?
That also depends on the financial institution. Typically, what happens is the financial institution will go with the conversion fee by the issuer. So that would be Visa, MasterCard, Amex. They would simply allow them so it would be same as if you had your own credit card and you used it, say, overseas, whatever sort of transaction fee you would have there. The financial institution typically just allows Visa, MasterCard, Amex to do that for them, unless the line of credit or the account itself is in the foreign currency, and typically that would only be done if there's a significant amount of volume. But if it's straight US dollars, it's just Visa's or MasterCard's conversion fee.
Okay, great. That is all the questions I see. So Mike, thank you very much for your informative presentation today. And I also want to thank our audience for your time and participation. The webinar has been recorded and it will be available for replay at any time. And if anyone thinks of additional questions or you would like more information on the subject of virtual cards, please contact your Travelon account manager. Again, thank you everyone, and have a great remainder of the day.